Hello and welcome viewers. All eyes are on the Shanghai Cooperation Organization Summit in China's Tianjin, where the global Eurasian leaders have just posed for the group photograph. This after a 55-minute India-China bilateral meeting earlier today, where Chinese President Xi Jinping told Prime Minister Modi that Beijing and New Delhi should choose friendship over rivalry and look beyond bilateral disputes amidst geopolitical churn. From the outset, this meeting has been historic. This is Prime Minister's first China visit in 7 years. And finally, the ties between the two superpower nations are stabilizing after the deadly border clashes in 2020. Bilateral relations and border issues were the core issues discussed in the 55-minute-long meeting. In his opening remarks, PM Modi has welcomed the restart of the Kailash Mansarovar Yatra and confirmed direct flights between India and China that are going to be restored soon. The Prime Minister also emphasized on mutual trust and sensitivity, saying interests of close to 3 billion people are linked to this cooperation. He's also asserted that ties between India and China have been improving since their last meeting in Kazan, and India is committed to taking the relations forward. Xi Jinping has also echoed similar sentiments, calling both countries a key player on the international level. The Chinese president has stressed that it is important for India and China to be friends and good neighbors, adding that the dragon and elephant must come together to preserve peace and prosperity in Asia and across the world.
Excellency, हमारे प्यारे दोस्तों के स्वागत के लिए मैं आपका हृदय से आभार व्यक्त करता हूं। पिछले वर्ष कयान में हमारी बहुत ही सार्थक चर्चा हुई। हमारे संबंधों को एक सकारात्मक दिशा मिली। सीमा पर डिसएंगेजमेंट के बाद शांति और स्थिरता का माहौल बना हुआ है। हमारे स्पेशल रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स के बीच बॉर्डर मैनेजमेंट के संबंध में सहमति बनी। कैलाश मानसरोवर यात्रा फिर से शुरू हुई। दोनों देशों के बीच डायरेक्ट फ्लाइट भी फिर से शुरू की जा रही है। हमारे सहयोग से दोनों देशों के 2.8 बिलियन लोगों के बीच जुड़े हुए हैं। इससे पूरी मानवता के कल्याण का मार्ग भी प्रशस्त होगा। परस्पर विश्वास, सम्मान और संवेदनशीलता के आधार पर हम अपने संबंधों को आगे बढ़ाने के लिए प्रतिबद्ध है। एक्सेलेंसी, चीन द्वारा SCO की सफल अध्यक्षता के लिए मैं आपको बहुत बहुत बधाई देता हूं। एक बार फिर चीन यात्रा के निमंत्रण के लिए और आज की हमारी बैठक के लिए आपका हार्दिक धन्यवाद।
So what really are some of the big takeaways as far as the statements coming out of both India and China are concerned? Let's analyze this, and one is of course the fact that there will be the Mansarovar Yatra and direct flights that are now going to be resuming. There's also improvement in India-China relations that is of course on the horizon, judging by the statements coming in. Forward movement on border issues is a very key area as well. India and China are going to join hands for a larger cause, is the statement coming in from both sides. A joint fight against Western pressure is also the big measure coming out as far as these announcements are concerned. But what are we really looking at in terms of the two countries and their ties? Very clearly, of course, they have acknowledged that India and China are not just partners, and our partners are not just rivals. They've asserted that ties must not be seen through the third nation's lens. And this is, of course, to prevent any analysis linking this directly with what's been happening recently vis-a-vis the United States. This is, of course, something that has been stated when it comes to the relations between India and China that has been very clearly set as far as this agenda is concerned. Also, on the issue of terror, the very fact that they need to expand common ground when it comes to the sensitive issue of terror has also been recorded as far as these statements are concerned. When it comes to the issue of trade, expanding investment ties has also been discussed at this meeting. The border issues, peace is important for the development of bilateral ties is what has been stated on this, and also in terms of future ties, where Xi Jinping has been invited for the 2026 BRICS summit here in India is also very significant. So this is as far as some of the key takeaways are concerned. There's also, of course, China and India it has been recorded in these statements are two of the most civilized nations. It is vital to be friends and good neighbors is something that has been stated. Dragon and elephant must come together, says Xi Jinping in the China as far as this statement is concerned, and also says it's our responsibility to uphold multilateralism. Both countries must work together for peace and prosperity is the statement coming from China's side. Also that India and China have a key role to play globally. This is a statement that is coming from Xi Jinping's side as well. Let's quickly open this up and take it across to our guest joining us. With us is Dr. John Huang, who's a professor at the OP Jindal University. We have Ambassador Anil Trigunayat, former diplomat, joining us. We have Lieutenant General KJ Singh, former Western Army commander, joining us. Also with us is Angie Huang, who is from the Miami GOP committee woman. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me begin with you, Ambassador Trigunayat. Your analysis of what has happened today, it's been a huge icebreaker, no doubt. The very fact that Prime Minister has gone there after 7 years, all of this happening after what we know happened in Galwan. Clearly, of course, the mood appears to be very positive. The big question is how far can India and China go together, work together, because there are also some fundamental differences.
Well, you're right, Madhav. I mean, we do have legacy issues which have been accentuated since Galwan. So therefore, whatever we do, we need to be vigilant before we trust. We need to verify before we trust. So these are very important issues, but at the same time, it appears since Kazan, when Prime Minister Modi and President Xi Jinping met, that there have been frequent exchanges at the high level, and they have been trying to iron out differences through the established mechanisms, of which, of course, the border and the management of the border has been quite a very, very important dimension in that disengagement and then further withdrawal of forces and all that will be discussed. And if you remember when Wang was here, he met NSA, and at that time it was decided to set up two working groups, especially to look after areas concerning this. So there have been a specific progress on that regard, which is very important because otherwise you can't really establish any trust. So I think the trust has been the key factor, which Prime Minister also spoke, which is like mutual trust and mutual sensitivities and accompanied by mutual respect. Those are very, very important. And of course, we have mutual interests given the kind of global disruptions that are taking place. Trade would have been another area in which they would have spoken significantly about that because China has been asking for border trade areas. We are ready to open some of those. And how to balance the trade is another dimension which is very important. And lastly, tourism.
I'm going to come to trade, sir. I'm just going to request all our panelists to let's approach the issues one by one. I'm going to certainly come to trade. That's a very important issue that you refer to, sir. But I want to bring in on the border issue our panelists, Professor Dr. John Huang. Dr. John Huang, there are two aspects of the border. One is, of course, the recent escalation, the build-up, which has now been thinning down. There have been several rounds of talks over the past several years. That is one aspect of it. But there is the other aspect which Mr. Wang Yi referred to following his meetings here in New Delhi, where he talks about an early harvest, two countries coming together. The big question is, can this be done? And if so, how quickly will this early harvest actually happen on ground? Because there are tremendous issues, historical issues and otherwise that are plaguing the two countries when it comes to border. I request you to unmute yourself and speak, sir. We can't hear you, Dr. Huang. Request you to unmute your audio.
Yeah, data is a very important issue between India and China. So I would say that in some sense, even India and China, they proceed very difficult very difficult in terms of improving their relationships. But whenever there's a border issue arise, then all the kind of achievement or the kind of improvement can become zero in a very short time. So borders should be very carefully addressed. But right now, even the border, I think the key issue there is to maintain the peace and tranquil among the order. We could not fix the border issue in a short time. So this is the key concern we are going to do. But actually, as Ambassador Anil says, actually we lack that kind of distrust. So you need to build up this distrust along the border, and then we need to see. And I will always urge that actually we can figure out even further permanent solution for along the border. Suppose like how to the kind of the democratic the delineate the border. I mean, not the border, but it is the concept of the land or the actual control. I think land or actual control is more important than the concept of the border. So this is definitely what India and China should focus on. Otherwise, all this kind of improvement can be only contemporary. That's my comments here.
Right. Lieutenant General Singh, I'd like you to come in on this. Obviously, trust is a big issue, and trust is an issue not just when it comes to Galwan, because when it comes to India, we've seen what's happened in Operation Sindoor, where Pakistan was not just armed and equipped, but also supported in major ways by China. How do we get over all those issues will be important, and how far will China be willing to accommodate India's point of view? Of course, terror has found a mention as far as the statement is concerned, but beyond that and going forward with cooperation, it will be very, very tricky, very, very challenging given the history of India and China's relations.
Madhav, Jai Hind. Diplomacy is the art of making impossible possible. So two large demography, most populous nations with such long border and nuclear arms, and no border protocols in place after Galwan. So it's a good thing that both the countries are resolving the border management issues. See, traditionally, China has said that let's keep this border resolution on the back burner and let's focus on trade and other issues. India has always maintained that it's equally important and it needs to be put right in the forefront. Now, there is some kind of agreement or some kind of adjustment where, while the trade is being given its importance, you certainly cannot have such two large armed forces with such long borders and not having a protocol in place. That's simply not, it's a very dangerous thing to happen. So it's good that there is certain amount of disengagement has taken place. For India, it's not so easy to pull back troops unless we have more clear protocols or border management sort of understanding in place. Because see, in our case, the logistics of staging forward troops is huge. It's in time terms, it is far more than what it takes China to get their troops to forward areas. So to that extent, we have to be careful. And you brought up this issue about China and Pakistan fusion. Now here I would like to caution one thing, where I am a bit of a contrarian. While Pakistan drew on China's support, but after weapons are sold, then a country can use it the way it wants. It's not as if there is an end user kind of an arrangement which is in place.
No, so more than that, sir, there's an issue of intelligence sharing that China was helping Pakistan. You would have also seen those reports, I'm sure. Yeah, so I was talking from that perspective.
I am concerned, Madhav, but the thing is, unless we have some kind of understanding, trust building, how are we going to reduce that collision?
Right.
This may be one means that China realizes that India needs to be given its due. And see, SCO is traditionally a forum which had anti-terrorism right at the center of it. Counter-terrorism is the main focus in SCO summits. There have been large number of joint exercises also. India has also done. So hopefully it's a great initiative and I commend.
Right, and also incidentally it is terrorism but not cross-border terror specifically. But let me bring in Angie Huang into this discussion. Angie Huang, you know, while the government statement, the Indian government statement very specifically says that India and China's thaw, or the improving relations between the two countries should not be looked at from the prism of any third country, but what's happened over the recent weeks is out there in the public domain. We all know the kind of statements that have been coming, whether it's Peter Navarro, whether it is Marco Rubio, or even the president himself, you know, the kind of statements coming in context of tariffs, which have been very, very undiplomatic. Somewhere, there's a sense of rebalancing, if not being pushed into the Russia-China corner, at least a sense of rebalancing that appears to be happening in terms of India mending its ties with other countries, and perhaps all of this happening as President Trump pushed through that 50% tariff, something that perhaps is going to work out in US's detriment.
Yes, and we're watching this very carefully. I like the visuals of the dragon and elephant joining together to fight against Western pressure, meaning Donald Trump and his team. It's very clear this summit is showing that India is trying to play hardball with the U.S. after facing its first week of secondary tariffs at 50% by attending the SCO Summit alongside China and Russia. Modi's really signaling that he is going to be uniting a front with the global South. But, you know, I've watched all the major news networks here in the U.S. this morning. No one's covering the summit whatsoever, not on the U.S. side. So Americans are largely uninformed about what is happening this weekend between Modi, Xi, Putin, and other world leaders. Now, you were right to say Peter Navarro, he is pressuring Modi to break ties with Russia and possibly with China, but that's certainly not what's happening here. Peter Navarro goes as far as to saying that Modi is somehow by proxy helping to fuel the Ukraine war. Now, I'm not sure if all of that's just pressure points and posturing or if it's real. I don't have that kind of intelligence.
He's actually called it Modi's war. I mean, there's a war between Russia and Ukraine, for Christ's sake. How is it Modi's war? That's a question people in India are just not able to understand. What's going on?
Unfortunately, I don't have that type of intel to verify that. But meanwhile, you know, you do have Scott Bessent, who is going to be emerging in these talks as kind of the peacemaker. He's going to be he's the only one who's going to be able to offer certain economic deals to India. So I think the two are trying to balance each other as we watch the summit play out. You know, it's certainly a tit for tat. And of course, you know, Putin aligning with Modi, that is certainly visual the U.S. cannot ignore.
Right. Let me bring in Anil Trigunayat on that. Ambassador Trigunayat, the question is, of course, the perception in U.S. will obviously be that this is India trying to play hardball, so on and so forth. And even if India is not, there appears to be a certain amount of rebalancing taking place. The big question that will be on several people's minds that if this is indeed some kind of a crude bargaining tactic by the current administration there in Washington, D.C., and if assuming things do come back to normal on the tariff issue in, say, 3 months, 6 months, a year or two down the line, in that situation then, what happens with the India-China relationship? Will it continue on the trajectory that it seems to have been set on today? How do you look at that aspect, sir?
Well, Madhav, personally, I look at it as a God-sent opportunity for India because a very large number of people had begun to feel very comfortable with their relationship with the U.S. And every relationship, whether it is with China, Russia, or United States, we must understand that these are all transactional relationships. Your own interests count first. Now, President Trump has chosen a certain path. And so that path has shown you that you just cannot depend to a great extent and the relationship that you nurture for 25 years, calling it a bipartisan support between the two largest and the greatest democracies, really has no backbone in that sense. And therefore, it is important for a country like India, which is today the fourth largest and soon to be third largest economy, to find its own path and find its own partners. If you come to think of it, China has been your second largest partner. Of course, our balance of trade has been negative in our favor, but then it is something that has been there. It has been essential, and Chinese do understand that very much. China also we can't ignore our neighbors. You can't choose your neighbors. Neighbors are there. You got to deal with them. And everybody wants peace, stability, and tranquility. We were working in a context of competition with cooperation. That has been the paradigm between India and China that was broken in 2020 with Galwan. So that is now being understood by the Chinese side. So it's good. We are part of the multilateral fora. We are part of the global south. And they are and strategic economic pivot has actually moved towards Asia and towards South. So that is something that sooner the Western countries understand, better it is for them. At the same time, of course, I would not comment on Mr. Navarro or others. They have their own readouts to talk from, but they are totally ill-informed. And I always say that, unfortunately, when ignorance is combined with arrogance, disaster is the end result.
All right. Ignorance and arrogance, a deadly cocktail there that you're referring to. But Dr. John Huang, there is a very, very important aspect of this, and that is the huge imbalance of trade. Somewhere, what President Trump is talking about is an issue that even India is facing, because it's at about $100 billion, if I'm not mistaken. Certainly, it's not like if the US market gets shut because of the tariffs, suddenly the Chinese market is going to open up for India, because China itself is notoriously protectionist. Some of the biggest companies, corporations, tech and otherwise don't have access to the China market. And that too was referenced in today's bilateral meeting. So what's the possibility of China opening up to that? Because this kind of a lopsided trade balance is obviously not going to be sustainable in the long term.
Yes, but there are some kind of structural issues here. Like, truly, like India has the kind of positive, they can import, like the kind of disputes comes from the US against India, and same things they are like China's import from India is much less than the Indians import, Indians export. So there's structural issues here, but the points there are, I think both sides they can discuss. They can talk about how to improve Indians import to China. Like we can some sectors like medicine. I think it is one possible field. Like if we look at the Indians export to the US, like medicine is one of the largest. So these things can happen to China, but India have to discuss with China how to open like the medicine, this kind of the market. And other things is I think India some of the issues there. India has really strict the kind of the visa regimes against China. But the point is that this kind of this strict visa regime has a very negative impact on the export. And these things maybe people do not know, but I can figure out, because if you want people to export from your country, then you must ask them to come, and then they can figure out what kind of things we can buy from India. So these things, I think India must has a very substantive that kind of the visa regime to allow the Chinese businessmen. If India, like you say, okay, we have some Chinese investment, or you want to export to China, then you must allow the Chinese businessmen to come. Like I give you an example. Another example is the leather industry. Leather industry is likely to happen to import to China. Like
Lieutenant General Singh, if you can come in on that. Yeah, just a second. Professor Huang, I want Lieutenant General Singh to respond to that, because is it for, a lack of access to Chinese goods or Chinese companies to Indian markets? And is that really a valid concern that Dr. Huang is sharing over here? Because to the best of my knowledge, there are any number of big Chinese corporations that are present here in India.
No, that is true. But what Professor is highlighting, there are two aspects I'd like to supplement here. One is that we essentially export to China primary raw materials. In that also, China tries to not be very accommodative. Now here, China has to realize that this kind of trade imbalance is not good. In the sense, China must go out more and help us to sort of address this imbalance. in terms of either opening up services sector, doing joint manufacturing, doing some ancillary kind of work, because between these two large economies, some kind of balance in trade has to be achieved.
Right.
The second issue, which was flagged by some people, is about opening the border trade. Now, border trade does take place from 3-4 places, Shivkila, Nathula, and in the central sector. Now, but that is limited. It's not a huge big trade happening. And surprisingly, in that trade, India has favorable balance.
Right.
So if that opens up, it's good for us. It's
All right.
good for
All right, we'll have to leave it there. Lieutenant General Singh, we have to slip into a quick break. I'd like to thank you as well as Ambassador Trigunayat, Professor Huang and Angie Wong for joining us on the show this evening.